Hello and welcome to another episode of NRL Rewind. I am Phil Whitehead, and I'd just like to kick this one off with a big thank you for everyone who made my last video, the look back at the Melbourne versus Manly match on Friday night, the most successful episode of NRL Rewind to date. Thank you so very much, and hopefully you'll enjoy this episode and all the episodes in the future just as much as that one. Now, of course, we're looking this week at all the action from round 25. There's a lot to get through as usual, so let's get it all started with the weekly wrap. It's been the talk of the town since Friday night, but for those living under a rock, Manly have completed an unbeaten season at Brookvale Oval with a dominant win over the Melbourne Storm in a spiteful encounter. I'll be giving my final thoughts on the aftermath of that now infamous Brookvale brawl later in this video, but in terms of the game, it was definitely one of Manly's most complete performances of the year, especially considering the injuries to David Williams and Brett Stewart. I think Manly will take an immeasurable amount of confidence out of that win. The rookie halves combination of Kieran Foran and Daly Cherry Evans again showed their class against the makeshift Storm pair of Rory Cross-Jason and Gareth Widdop. I've said it a few times before, but I'll say it again. Melbourne cannot win the competition without both Cooper Cronk and Cameron Smith. Those who see Smith as being good enough to do it on his own might be reassessing that view after this round. Another Golden Point match and another loss for the last placed Parramatta Eels, who need to beat the Titans next week to avoid their first wooden spoon since 1972. It seems almost fate that the Eels will collect the undesired award that few fans would suggest they really deserve, after another horrible refereeing oversight allowed Roosters prop Jason Riles to claim a try without video examination. The replay would clearly show Riles knocking on in attempting to ground the ball. That was the break the boys from Bondi needed after being outplayed for the first 65 minutes, and Braith Anasta capped the comeback win with a field goal in extra time. The Bulldogs' chances of a finals appearance are similar to the chances of finding Harold Holt alive and well, but they've held on to their mathematical Hail Mary with a second-half revival against a shaky Newcastle Knights. The Dogs looked gone after a disjointed first half, which saw them trail 22-6 at half-time, but with Jim Dimmick's address still ringing in their ears, Canterbury looked a completely different side in the second 40, and Livewire fullback Ben Barber would provide an exclamation point on an incredible turnaround with one of the best individual try-scoring efforts ever seen. I'm not convinced it didn't technically knock on. It's in the record books though, and will be awfully hard to beat for try of the year. The Cowboys have boosted their hopes of a top 4 finish with a hard-fought win over Cronulla in Townsville. This was the Sharks' 7th loss in a row, but the big story out of the match would be Tariq Sims, who suffered a sickening broken leg which will see him out for the rest of the season. The Cowboys were further depleted when Dallas Johnson was left seeing stars thanks to Cade Snowden's accidental knee. However, a starring performance from winger Ashley Graham and a pair of tries to young forward Jason Tomalolo were just enough to see the locals home, albeit not in the most convincing fashion. The Canberra Raiders' loss to the Panthers leaves them with a minuscule chance of being awarded with the 2011 wooden spoon. It was the same old story for the malfunctioning Green Machine, who now need to hope they either beat the Bulldogs next Sunday or the clash between the Eels and Titans does not end in a draw. This match was retiring captain Alan Tung's last in front of a home crowd, but an opportunity to snatch victory after the siren was denied when Josh Dugan was not awarded a penalty after it looked as though he was tackled when chasing his own kick. Tung himself turned in a great performance, scoring a try in his final game at home against the team he debuted at home against in the year 2000. They needed a bizarre piece of assistance from the referee, but the St George Illawarra Dragons have their first win in 6 weeks, beating a hard-done-by Warriors side at WIN Stadium. Though it's hard to say the Dragons were the better side, they did improve visibly in attack as the match went on, stretching New Zealand on both sides out wide. Fans were left scratching their heads in the first half when Beau Scott was allowed to offload while clearly held and Mark Gasnier raced away to score. The Warriors would have ample time to make up for that non-call, but in the end, the 6 points from that try decided the match. The Warriors still appear to be in much better shape heading into the finals, although this result has cost them any realistic hope of a top 4 finish. Brisbane have kept the pressure on second-placed Manly following an unfashionable 12-point win over the South Sydney Rabbitohs. However, the game itself has taken a back seat to news that Greg Inglis's ankle injury is far worse than initially hoped. The star centre will miss the remainder of the season, and without their backline talisman, it seems unlikely that Souths will cause too many upsets, despite coach John Lang putting on a brave face after the match. For the Broncos, this may have been their least convincing win for some time, but they can certainly take a lot from their defensive effort in the second stanza, keeping the Rabbitohs scoreless. Dave Taylor can be considered a little lucky to be playing against the Knights next week after appearing to hit Ben Hannant with a careless high shot. While the West Tigers have had the easiest run into the finals you could ever imagine, there were some signs on Monday night that the weeks of not being tested might have lulled the Tigers into a false sense of security. While the result was never in doubt, there were also little doubt that Wests didn't display the focus, attention to detail or intensity required to win finals games. Benji Marshall had a whale of a game, and there was plenty of trademark Tigers flair, but the lack of ball control, particularly in the second half, would not have pleased Tim Sheens, who must now be seeing his side's grand final potential. Wests can lock in 4th position next week by finishing Cronulla's season with 8 straight losses. To the ladder now, and Manly have only a remote chance of stealing the minor premiership in the final round, with most of the interest lying in the battle for 8th between Newcastle and Souths, and the wooden spoon match between Parramatta and the Gold Coast. Time now to look at the best and worst performances for round 25 with the Spectrum, and for the best performance of the week I couldn't go past Melbourne Storm fullback Billy Slater for the way he looked after injured Sea Eagles winger David Williams in the middle of what was a very tense, very heated match at Brookvale Oval on Friday night. He was absolutely brilliant in his response and the way he pushed everything else to one side in order to look after David Williams, who had suffered that very serious neck injury. And I think that in different circumstances that could have made a big difference to the extent of the Wolfman's injury. So on behalf of all Sea Eagles fans, and I think all fans of rugby league in this country, well done and thank you to Billy Slater. On the other side of things, the worst performance of the week, I don't think after last night you could really go past the Gold Coast Titans as a whole and as a team. Going down 39 points to 10 to the West Tigers. It wasn't so much that the Titans got beaten by 29 points. I'm not sure that anyone was really expecting them to win, but to allow a 29-point difference when the Tigers really didn't play anywhere close to their best football or anywhere close to the kind of football they'll need to play in the finals, I think it was a very disappointing display from a team that by all rights will be very, very fortunate to avoid the wooden spoon. Time for the rant of the week, and now going back to Friday night, which I'm sure will surprise nobody, the aftermath of the Brookvale brawl. And I was hearing a lot of what I felt were very exaggerated, very overly emotional responses as in terms of what sort of penalties should be dished out to the players involved in that brawl. There were no shortage of players that had a bit of a highlighted involvement, I guess you could say, in that brawl. Now the end result, 10 players were cited, 10 players charged. I'm going to go ahead and say that I have no issue with any of the outcomes. Of course, we're at this point still waiting to see the final result of Glenn Stewart and Adam Blair's cases because they've been referred straight to the judiciary. They'll have their hearing on Wednesday night. I don't think that you can really say that any of those suspensions were out of line. The Melbourne players, of course, they came off the bench to get involved. Darcy Lussick, I think he had a definite case to answer as far as his involvement in both what started the brawl and in the second phase of the fight. I had a little bit of a giggle to myself at the amount of people that were coming out of the woodwork saying that Brett Stewart, for his part, should go for 6 weeks. I don't think that was ever really on the cards. I don't see it. He came in at speed, yes. He jumped, yes. But he clearly made a grab for Adam Blair's collar as opposed to coming in with a big swinging arm. He made absolute minimal contact with Adam Blair at all. And the idea that he'd go for 6 weeks because of some intent that doesn't add up to the footage that you saw, I just found that to be a little bit excessive, to say the least. As far as the reaction from David Gallop to say that this kind of thing is going to stop parents wanting their children to play rugby league, I can't agree. I can't agree with that. I think the sort of people that complain about seeing the sort of thing that happened on Friday night are people that generally look to make complaints about things like this anyway. They sit at home, they wait, and then they see something they don't like and they're straight on the phone or they're straight on the email. I think that the kind of people that will stop their kids from playing rugby league as a result of seeing a one-off situation like we saw on Friday night are the kind of people that were looking for an excuse not to let their kids play a contact sport. I think that now that it's been done and primarily dealt with, as I said, with the exception of Glenn Stewart and Adam Blair's hearing on Wednesday night, we can all move on. Neither team has suffered sufficient penalty to effectively rule them out of the premiership this year, and I think that's the best thing for the game, certainly the best thing for the two individual clubs, and I think we can all move on now and enjoy the remainder of the season. Time for this week's Fearless prediction, and with both the Newcastle Knights and South Sydney Rabbitohs falling to their respective opponents in round 25, the final place in the 2011 top 8 will be decided in their match against each other in round 26. I expect that Newcastle will win that match and seal 8th position on the back of just one too many injuries for South Sydney and the fact that the game is at home for Newcastle. As far as any chance of the Bulldogs jumping both those sides into the top 8, I think there's more chance of me being named as fullback for Manly this week. And that wraps it up for this week's instalment of NRL Rewind. Thank you very much for watching, and don't forget to like and rate this video a thumbs up. Also, don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube account and follow us on Facebook and Twitter. I'll be back next week with all the action from the final round of the 2011 NRL Premiership, and then it's on to the finals. I'll see you all next week.